Oh, hi, weirdos. Dan Rossbach here, your lead discussant at the Weird Book Club. You know, we like to joke around here a lot on the WBBC, poke a bit of fun at ourselves, try not to be too dry and lit theory-y. But today we're talking about one of my new favorite authors, César Aira. And I wanted to do more of a deep dive today into some of the major themes that I've encountered throughout his work, particularly in his 1990 novel Ghosts. If you've been following my channel for a little while, you may remember from my funny book recommendation video that I first fell in love with Ira mainly over the fact that we had both grown well into our adulthoods without the slightest fucking clue how the moon works. But as I've delved further into his back catalog of over 100 novels, short story collections, and essays, I've discovered his true talent for tackling extremely difficult subject matter like ghost penises. Did you feel that? Got kind of cold in here all of a sudden. Anyway, getting back into some of the major criticisms of his work, some people seem to think that his stream of consciousness writing style signals a lack of artistic effort on Ira's part. But I would argue... Ghost penises! Okay, there is definitely something strange going on here. Getting a little creeped out, honestly, but I'm going to keep pushing through because I honestly believe that Ira's work should be required work for anybody who loves ghost penises. Apparently, I'm not allowed to perform any kind of analysis until I acknowledge this looming presence over us. Some kind of supernatural forces compelling me to complete their unfinished business. All these innocent victims on Goodreads. No one will find peace until I can finally explain Ira's fixation on ghost penises. I don't know why I've been chosen, but I promise that I won't stop until I've discovered the truth that will let these spirits rest. I've got it. It came to me just now in a dream. A grand unifying theory of ghost genitalia. It's so elegant in its simplicity. I can't believe I didn't think of it before. The secret formula is JK lol plus a shrug emoji, all divided by a meme with a Guy Fawkes mask in it, and all of that multiplied by a snake eating its own tail. We did it. This house is clean. Now we can finally get to the real meat of this novel without wasting another thought on phantasmal genitalia. In fact, we'll make that the theme of this review. 3 awesome things about ghosts in addition to, Number 1, it luxuriates in limbo. Ira sets off the novel by establishing this great, uneasy atmosphere. Every single element of the setting seems to be hovering just above some kind of tipping point. It's New Year's Eve. We come upon a massive, not quite finished building. Its airy, open framework is fully built, but still no windows yet, no doors. We're told that after the New Year holidays, this building is going to be finally divided up into luxury condos, each section sealed off from the rest, decorated and customized to each new resident's tastes. For now, though, it's mostly populated by little groups of unspeaking naked specters. This feeling that 2 parallel worlds, past and present, life and afterlife, are starting to overflow and intertwine. It's a common trope in ghost stories. And yet, just as frequently, Ira seems to be turning these conventions on their head. Instead of the traditional thunderstorm that forces everyone to stay put inside the haunted house, we get a blazing, blinding heat wave. Remember, this is New Year's Eve in the Southern Hemisphere. The overall atmosphere is actually quite festive, filled with celebratory feasts and family gatherings. There's also the main family who's dealing with these spirits. They're Chilean immigrants, temporary laborers and their children who live and work on the construction site. This isn't their haunted house. These aren't their ghosts. There's no need for an exorcism, no secret family tragedy that has to be avenged. Many family members, especially the kids, see these supernatural presences popping up in odd places all the time. But they are decidedly not bothered. Mostly they just ignore them or laugh along with their cartoonish antics. The only person who regards the ghosts with some degree of seriousness is Patri, the family's eldest daughter. Almost out of necessity, she's a very responsible big sister, constantly herding her little siblings around what is for them a 7-story playground with no safety equipment. And while her mom definitely appreciates the help in child rearing, she's troubled by a certain indecisiveness in Patri's character, what mom refers to as her frivolity. Patri doesn't seem to be interested in sticking to any one thing long enough for it to become the foundation for a solid adult identity. No consistent academic or athletic activities, no romantic relationships, or really any social life outside the family. So, given her particular in-betweenness, maybe it should come as no surprise that the ghosts suddenly, for the first time, choose to speak to Patri. They invite her to something called the Midnight Feast. Apparently a big deal for ghosts, but what exactly it entails is never really explained. Of course, they warn her, you'll have to be dead to attend. Her response is, let me think about it. So Patri spends the rest of the story stewing over what for most of us would seem like a patently absurd choice. Abandon all existence as she knows it for, what, some ghost party? And yet she can't shake the feeling that the ghost's strange mode of existence, they're apparently able to work between different planes of reality. It's just as real and beautiful as anything else she's ever experienced in her entire 15 years of being a human being. To her, it's not so much a choice between life and death as it is between existing as a flesh and blood individual or something else entirely. It's a really interesting way of reframing the stakes of a traditional ghost story, and yet somehow no less horrifying to contemplate. Number 2, it lets kids be kids. That is to say, like little poltergeists. We're all rational, skeptical adults here, right? We've got a decent sense of how the world works. A ghost, some kind of supernatural being that sort of looks like a human, seems to harbor emotions like grief and resentment as humans do, but behaves according to some totally unknowable system of logic. Well, that's just absurd, right? But then, how do we account for those meddling kids? No, I mean like this, like real little kids. Here's a secret that will come as no surprise to anyone who's spent a lot of time around little kids. They're super weird. As a father of 2, it's not at all uncommon for me to wake up in the middle of the night with a tiny person just staring me right in the face. Or to be minding my own business in the shower only to have the door burst open, followed by an explosion of maniacal laughter. If any other class of human did this, I'd be terrified. But when they're your kids, you just kind of laugh it off. They're clearly function on some totally other way of perceiving the world. It can be kind of hilarious in that way where you're not always sure what exactly it is you're laughing at. And the kids in Ira's novella are just this kind of cartoonish, disruptive presence. Not all that dissimilar really from the mostly goofy ghosts. They're both prone to sudden disappearances, only to pop up suddenly in some remote, shady corner of the building. And you can tell Ira has real respect for the kids' little eccentricities, as well as all the hard work that their caretakers put into just trying to get some kind of clear message into their headspace. Here's one of the passages that I thought really demonstrated the funny way that kids always seem to be running on some parallel system of logic. So this is as they're being served for New Year's dinner. The children rush for the cups, and were disappointed to find that they contain only little ice cubes and nothing to drink. Reluctant to waste the opportunity to do something, they started shaking the cups to make a noise, and naturally some ice came out and fell on the floor. Inés Viñas called them to order and took them all to the tap so they could rinse off the cubes, which were covered with dust. Even those who hadn't dropped their ice wanted to rinse it. And the really cool trick that I think Ira pulls off in this novella is that the more the kids seem to defy all adult logic, the funnier it seems that all the adults in the story are able to effectively ignore away all the other inexplicable presences that share their home. That is to say, the literal fucking ghosts. Kind of makes you wonder about all the other facets of existence that they might be missing out on. Number 3, it shows you the beauty of space-time. At certain times in life, I think we've all looked out at a space and thought, I'll never see it quite like this again. Like walking through your apartment one more time right before you move out. Or sitting in your office on the first day of a new job. Or some equally sappy third example. You get the picture though. It's not just physical space itself that you're experiencing. Some element of time is creeping in there too. Expectations for the future, nostalgia for the past. They're sitting right there in that room with you. As sites of past trauma, haunted houses are a pretty well-worn metaphor for this experience. The new residents see scenes from a long-ago murder or an untimely death replayed again and again, which can be kind of disturbing when you're just trying to live your day-to-day life here in the present. But where many writers go for shock and horror, Ira veers towards the eerily beautiful. totally nondescript, mundane environments can suddenly become possessed by time. Here's a passage from where the oldest daughter, Patri, is wandering through the construction site just as the evening light begins to change. There was something architectural about the dusk as well. It was a construction, not governed by chance, as one might have supposed in the case of a meteorological phenomenon, but well thought out. Or rather, it was itself a kind of thought. The largest conceivable spaces were transformed into instants, and under covering layers like roofs or paving stones, grids of shadows, light, and color formed. But it couldn't be called a real construction, not in the usual sense of the word. Not as the building was real, for example. The dusk was provisional, indifferent, subtle. Its compartments of light were home to no one, for the moment, but anyone could see their image cut out of a photograph and stuck to the beautiful heavenly roof. Within the imaginary great construction, minor real constructions reared, gloriously useless and incomplete, provisional too, but in their own way hinting at a permanence. And the strangest thing about it was that all this was a time of day, or night, but really more a time of day, and nothing else. And Ira achieves this strange merger of space and time again and again throughout the novella. At the family's New Year party, where the fading light forms new boundaries on the building where the children are allowed to play. And in the dramatic conclusion, which I will not spoil. There's a fourth dimensional quality to Ira's writing that I've rarely seen even in the trippiest of sci-fi novels. For that, he has my eternal respect. So for style, scope, and overall weirdness, I give Ghosts by César Aira 5 out of 5 ghost penises. Look, okay, I understand why people might feel some kind of way about the fact that seemingly random descriptions of ghost dongs take up so much space in what is already a pretty short story. Writer Camille Hassan described a similar sentiment in the LA Review of Books after he read all 16 of Ira's works that have been translated into English so far. He says, "There's a certain brand of criticism reserved for overstuffed, bizarre stories. It consists of the critic throwing up their hands in despair and saying, 'Sure, whatever, why not?' It usually has to do with a lack of narrative cohesion or consistency, but mostly it's about the element of surprise. And that's fair enough. And yet," he goes on to say, "so much is made of Ira's oddities, plot twists, and diversions, but I want to convince you that it's the emotional effect that should make you stick around. I read Ghosts last of all, and I was entirely unprepared for it. No other translated work of his is as detailed or as tremulous." So yeah, sure, you could get hung up on all the ghost penises, or you could just enjoy how they make you feel. Which one sounds better to you? Next steps, what you gonna do for the next steps? So this is the section where we talk about recommendations. You're still feeling somewhat haunted by Ira's novella, and you're looking for something to help you recapture that supernatural sensuousness. If you're looking for another book that speaks to the seductive power of the supernatural, you should definitely check out The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now this book shows up pretty much every year in October on lists of the best horror fiction of all time. But for me personally, I like to read horror that completely, utterly warps my sense of reality. That does things so strange with literature that it actually leaves me feeling somewhat uncertain about the natural world that I thought I knew. The Haunting of Hill House is, at its core, a haunted house story. Such a well-worn corner of horror fiction. How could it even be possible that there would be a book out there in that style that could shake and unsettle you in the way so much modern weird fiction does? But let me tell you, I think that despite its already substantial reputation, The Haunting of Hill House continues to be underrated. I was caught utterly by surprise by just how transgressive this book was for its genre, for the time period in that it was written. It has very explicit queer relationship dynamics between the main character and one of the more gender fluid members of the group that's investigating the paranormal phenomena in this house. And it somehow manages to use the well-worn tropes of the haunted house narrative to produce this utterly unique and thoroughly disturbing journey of self-discovery for the protagonist. Like, she finds her true self in this haunted house. And the ending was so tense, I honestly felt myself short of breath as things came to their final dramatic conclusion. Shirley Jackson deserves all the credit that she's gotten for this book, and far more in my opinion. That's all I really have to talk about for this week. Have you read any fiction by César Aira? What did you think? Tell me about it in the comments down below. Have you ever read an online review of a book that you really enjoyed and the person was getting so caught up on one specific detail you thought to yourself, did we even read the same book? What are some of the books that you loved but that were generally not well received by the reading public? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and opinions. I've also provided links to my social media accounts so that you can interact with me on those platforms if that's something that you're more comfortable with. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to me prattle on and on about literature in my basement. This channel has just passed 100 subscribers, and I'm completely blown away by the fact that there are more than 2 people in the world, my mom and my husband, who are interested in hearing me talk about this stuff. So thank you so much. You are loved, you are appreciated, and I look forward to talking about more books with you very soon. So until next time, happy reading, weirdos.